this morning. I saw Furiosa last night, and I liked it a lot. I liked it a lot. Probably not as much as Fury Road, but it's really hard to capture the magic twice, or the lightning in the bottle, whatever you want to call it. I thought that Fury Road was really special, but part of that specialness, I think, was one, just the George Miller's vision, but the fact that we hadn't seen anything like that in a long time. And it's really even very different than, say, earlier Mad Max movies. And I'm not even including, the original Mad Max, but kind of, I guess, the, Road Warrior, and then Beyond Thunderdome. Beyond Thunderdome being a favorite of mine. So I don't know how well it's aged. I haven't seen it forever. I'm sure it's got some good things, some bad things. As I posted a short yesterday, and somebody responded quoting, or no, not short, sorry, it was an image, and somebody responded by quoting the scene. I don't even know the character's name in Thunderdome. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying time is here. And I remember saying back, like, man, that moment is just one of those. I don't know, it's one of my top cinematic moments. It almost gives me goosebumps seeing it. But Furiosa was really good, and I like Anya Taylor-Joy. It's interesting that she doesn't look at all like Charlize Theron, and not that, I don't know, I go back and forth with these. It's a little bit weirder, I guess. And I marked spoilers in this. So if you haven't seen the movie yet and you care about such things, I don't even know that this is a movie that you go, oh my gosh, this is not a movie about twists and turns, and I'm not intending to really talk so much about particular plot points, but I didn't want anyone to be caught unaware, so I put kind of spoilers in the title and kind of spoilers, here. It's always interesting when they pick an actress to play the younger or older version who doesn't really look much like the other actress. And I mean, to the point that it's not even that, oh, okay, Charlize Theron and Anya Taylor-Joy, it's not like they don't look like exact duplicates. Granted, I mean, that's really hard to find unless you're going to use kind of digital thing. But it's interesting that to me, they don't look anything alike. Like, there's no way that you put Charlize Theron and Anya Taylor-Joy as kind of a before, and then, hey, 10 years later, or I don't even know how many years later, now it's this. It's like, that's not the same person. So, obviously, you want to find the right actor for the job. I presume in that Trump's kind of look-alikeism, but that's interesting. And for the most part, it didn't, I wouldn't say really ever bothered me as more of an oddity, especially with Anya Taylor-Joy, because she has very distinctive eyes. Her eyes are just, I seem like a really unique part of her look. And of course, Charlize Theron doesn't have that at all. I think one thing that, so I wanted to talk about kind of world building, because look, I'd love to do movie reviews on the channel, but I don't think most people are tuning in here to look at to any point to just do straight up movie reviews. I think as a movie, I think Furiosa is very good. I think it's maybe it's a step down from Fury Road, and I was thinking about this. So I was thinking about a lot of things. It's shorts, I'm walking home, so I thought I'd just record some really quickly, and it's only a minute, so you don't really get a chance to delve into much. So I picked one thing, which was the world building part. Now I'm going to get to that, because I think there's more to say on that. I think the other thing is, it struck me that maybe this is why I don't love gonzo stuff in my games, like in my ye old OSR games. I'm not a huge fan of just gonzo all the time. But I don't mind gonzo elements. I've used gonzo, or, I don't know, gonzo, just, I guess in gonzo and stuff being kind of way over the top, or being kind of extreme, or mix and matching genres. I like it when it's in kind of smaller doses. I'm not a big fan when kind of that's the world and it's just sort of whatever. And there are many reasons why, and it's just my personal, preference. But one of the things I felt like this movie kind of illustrated for me is you get these points of kind of diminishing returns. And Fury Road, which I loved. So if I was going to rank these movies, I would say, Fury Road's an A+, and Furiosa would be a B+. So not a huge step down. Okay, a grade level, but if you could probably talk me into saying that maybe Fury Road's an A and B+, whatever. But they're close, right? In the same ballpark. Both very much passing grades. Both sort of top of the class. When you see the things in Fury Road, everything is new. I'd never seen anything of that. I mean, of course people have done movies in the desert, movies with vehicles, whatever, but the imagination, the combinations, just the kind of crazy way that they just went with that in this milieu of this kind of wasteland was just something I hadn't seen before. The scale, everything, the the cars with those pole things flashing back and forth. The guy, like the giant guitar guy in front of the speakers, and everything. It was just like, whoa, we'd never seen this before. Right? It was so beyond what Mad Max, certainly Mad Max Thunderdome and the Road Warrior had done. Obviously, budget, special effects, everything was a completely different ballpark, but just still in the kind of the universe. And I don't even know if there is some kind of extended Mad Max universe. I don't know if there are books and comics or anything, but just going from, okay, we'd left things off at Thunderdome, at the end of Thunderdome, and then you end up at Fury Road and you just go, oh my gosh, like this is just like magnitudes bigger. We had never seen this before. Now you get to Furiosa. Also has a tremendous wasteland vehicle sequence, and I can't imagine anyone would be like, no, I would have never guessed. This is not a spoiler, right, that there's something like that. But the highs of that, even though I think in some ways, not in the scale, which is kind of interesting, but I don't even know if you're going to look at stunt-wise, if the stunt work is much more difficult, but you just can't reach the same peak. If the Fury Road sequences peak kind of up here just because of everything and the context that we've never seen it before, Furiosa is down here. And it's not really a slight towards Furiosa, but you can't capture that lightning in a bottle twice. You've kind of seen it before, right? When those poles that they're climbing on, they're doing all that stuff, and the cars, you've seen it already. It's just not as special. And I think I'm kind of glad that they didn't try to super up the stakes like the Fast and the Furious movies. And people have joked about, what are they going to do next, right? They always kind of or Mission Impossible, the Tom Cruise Mission Impossible movies are probably another thing where they have to keep kind of raising it, and it's like they're just going to get crazier and crazier. They didn't really try to go crazier with Furiosa, I don't think. They added some new wrinkles, and they showed some kind of different toys, if you will. But it almost felt like there was stuff kind of on the cutting room floor, like, oh, we couldn't quite get these guys doing this thing in Fury Road, but we can use it in Furiosa. Again, it's not bad, but it just reminds me of kind of the Gonzo stuff, where I think that when you have a little bit of Gonzo that you can be really punchy, it can be that amazing, like, oh my gosh moment. You see, like at the end of the original Planet of the Apes, if the first time you ever watched that movie and you hadn't been spoiled on it, and I don't know even if it's even possible anymore with all the just all the times it's been referenced and duplicated wherever, but they're riding along the sand and they see the Statue of Liberty sticking out of the water. You have that moment, you go, oh my gosh, right, this movie's totally different than we thought it was. Like, this is this element, just bam, like that's big. It's huge. You can't really get there with later movies. And I think with Gonzo elements, I find anyway, that when you have a Gonzo element that you can deploy as kind of a Statue of Liberty moment that just shakes things up in a crazy way or just totally throws a curveball in, it's really powerful. But when that just kind of becomes everything, then I feel like it loses a lot of that. And not that Furiosa became everything, but I think that Furiosa, to the extent that it suffers a bit, the only reason it suffers is because we've had Fury Road already. And Fury Road, unless you're going to really change it up, and I think hats off to George Miller for not just trying to go like, we're going to up the ante like significantly. We're going to go bigger, 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 because it probably would have been bad. But by the same token, it's just not quite the same. So on to the kind of world building. So I don't even know if I'm right or wrong, but I did feel like a little bit like it reinforced some of my ideas of how I appreciate Gonzo stuff, right? You kind of deploy it, right? You sort of deploy it in a focused kind of way where it can really be like, this is the thing. The interesting, hey Ian, yes, Vertical Todd is here. Let me take a sip of, I got a little bit of coffee left for the working man. The interesting thing with the world building, which is why I touched on my little short yesterday, was basically it reminded me that kind of fun trumps sense. And I don't mean to be nonsensical, but I mean sometimes, and I include myself in this, we can get very wrapped up in kind of what's real or what makes where the logic is. And now I do think that Fury Road and Furiosa have a world that is in so many ways so illogical, it makes no sense. But the reason why it works is because, one, it's a lot of fun. And then that was kind of the point of my short, that ultimately fun trumps sense. If you have two options you could do in your world, and one of them is going to be a lot of fun, however you want to judge fun or interest or engagement, whatever word you want to use. And one of them can be the one that logically makes sense. I would say go for the one that's the engaging one 100 out of 100 times. You can always come up with some excuse why whatever it is that you're doing doesn't or however the thing that doesn't make sense makes sense, or magic, technology, just weird, weird whatever. Our world just works differently than the Earth, and so whatever, right? Now, I think you have to keep in mind, or we all have to keep in mind when we're going through this exercise, that part of why they're able to do it in Furiosa and in Fury Road and do it so well is because it's a movie and it's not interactive. The characters are going, the lens that we're looking at these things only go where George Miller wants our lens to go. And it can be as fast and as tight and as focused and not show the seams or hide the seams. And it's not necessarily always going to be successful with that, but you can kind of, and a good example, and this is in Fury Road and in Furiosa, so again, I don't feel like I'm really doing too many spoilers, though I did put the warning in the title. But you have these three, what do they call them? Outposts, fortresses. There are three just main, I guess, power centers in the wasteland. One is the Citadel, and that's that one. If you saw Fury Road, it's they got these kind of elevated mesas, and they grow stuff on top of all the mesas, and they they've got these huge cranes. They lift things up and down. And they're essentially protected from the wasteland because they only have kind of one access, one lift that goes up and down, and essentially they can just raise the lift. They got food, they got water up there. You really can't. They'll run out of fuel, they'll run out of bullets, but ultimately it seems like the perfect kind of fortress. Then you have Gas Town, which just looks like there's a big gas refinery in the middle of nowhere. Okay, and then you have Bullet Town, which looks like a quarry, and I don't understand what a quarry has to do with making bullets. But you have these three centers, and each one provide. What's interesting, like if you think from a kind of gaming perspective, each one of these provides an essential resource for this world. You need bullets, you need gas, and you need food. The Citadel provides food, Gas Town provides gas, and Bullet Town provides bullets. Ian said, "What's it called? The refrigerator test. You just need to be believable and consistent enough until someone's standing in front of the fridge at night, going, wait, that didn't make sense.'" Yeah, that makes. I thought for a minute, Ian, I thought that was going to be you were referring to Indiana Jones surviving the nuclear blast by hiding in the refrigerator. But yeah, I mean, and the ultimate one of those movies for me was Independence Day. I saw it in the movie theaters with my friends, and it was funny because we were like all into it until like we leave the movie theater, and I think it was in the parking lot or walking to the parking lot out of the movie theater where we all started going like, hey, wait a minute. This doesn't make any sense at all, and for those kind of movies, it works. So yeah, that's a really good kind of test, right? So Mad Max, we have there are three key resources to surviving in the wilderness, and they're all located, or they're all are generated at these three centers. And generating is kind of the word, because again, once you start to think about it for any length of time, it makes zero sense. How can you have you have a refinery out in the middle of nowhere, but how is the oil getting to the refinery? Like, it's great to say, okay, we're going to refine and make high quality gasoline, or I think even they call it high quality gasoline. I don't know what that even look like, or I don't know what's involved in making high quality versus low quality gasoline, but I would have guessed that given everything that's happened, that low quality gasoline would be a gift enough. But whatever. But where's the actual raw materials come from? It's never stated. You don't see any pipelines. You don't hear about any trucks coming or going. It's just everything apparently is there. They've got some tube that goes into the center of the earth and just pulls out oil. And they're able to, and then they have all the ingredients they need and everything they need to refine it, and that stuff apparently doesn't run out. Apparently, the other thing is all these places are self-sufficient. Bullet Town never runs out of metal or gunpowder or all the different things that make bullets, the casings and everything. They never run out of any of that stuff. They can just continually make bullets, right? And the Citadel can continually make food. And they seem to do a lot with it. Looks like, I don't know, what are they, like some kind of like lettuce or cabbage. They're able to just kind of do that, never run out. And of course, Gas Town never runs out of gas. but it makes a lot of sense in that setting for the stories that George Miller is trying to tell. It because it creates this sort of dynamic of three, which it doesn't really come up much in Fury Road too much. I think that they go to Gastown. I know that they have a little bit with the guy from Bullet Town, but they don't really get into the politics of this kind of three triumvirate. But they do in a bit more in Furiosa, which is interesting. But it kind of creates some neat elements when you have, okay, well, someone controls that, someone controls that, someone controls that. How they work together, and of course, what happens potentially if one person doesn't control all three of them, like, you know, or how these three things kind of work together. Now, Fury Road and Furiosa, neither Furiosa nor Fury Road really get into it. That's not the kind of movies they're trying to tell, right? And of course, because they're not telling those stories so much, they can kind of glaze over a lot of stuff that might be super important if you were playing a game in there. If I was playing in Furiosa, or let's just say in, I don't know, Mad Max the game, or post-apocalyptic Wasteland the game, and I was going to have, there's Bullet Town, and there's Gas Town, and there's the Citadel, I think players might start asking some fair questions, which would force us to develop things in a way that George Miller didn't have to. If I'm playing a game and I'm going to Gastown, or I'm trying to deal with Gastown, or maybe I'm trying to take over Gastown, or I'm trying to do anything, it might be, hey, Kabuki Kid, it might be incumbent on me to want to figure out, well, where is the oil coming from? Because I might want to, maybe I want to blow up or threaten, I think it would be a perfectly good, as an NPC or as a player character, to say, the leverage for Gastown, if you don't have the food, because obviously one leverage is, you're in the Citadel, you've got the food. So that puts a lot of pressure on the other ones, because you can live without the fuel. You can live without the bullets, especially if you're in the Citadel. You can't live without the food. So the Citadel is always going to kind of have the upper hand, which I think is demonstrated in the movies. Immortan Joe, who is in both movies, is clearly the head person. And I appreciate that they play him mostly as someone who is kind of scary, but not a dummy, right? He's smart. Seems to be a smart player, but they kind of surround him with folks who are a little bit more goofy, which I think is a nice thing to do. I think it adds some levity to the movies, and I think it's a neat thing. Maybe if I was going to look and say what other things outside the world building, I think the way they mix competency and goofiness in the major characters, not so much Furiosa, she's not really goofy, but the other characters, like Liam Hemsworth's character, whose name is Dementus. He's really effective and he's smart, but he's also pretty darn goofy. And I actually kind of like that they let him be a bit goofy and didn't try to make him kind of Immortan Joe Jr. or another just dark, brooding bad guy. Not that he doesn't have some of those elements to him, because he does, but they let him be a little bit goofy too. Kabuki Kid says, personally, I love Furiosa, snapped together well with Fury Road. George Miller wanted to film it all at the same time as Fury Road. He wrote them together. Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. That would have been a lot to do together. You would have had to do... I just think that's, Peter Jackson did it with Lord of the Rings. It just seems like it's really hard. And if you don't catch the actors at the right time and the right schedules, like, it's nigh impossible. It would have been interesting because there would have been a little bit better continuity, just kind of Anya Taylor-Joy dealio. But, you got to do what you got to do. But yeah, it was good. So we got these three poles, right? But in the movie, you can get away with not fleshing them out. And here's where I'm going to get to kind of, I guess maybe I would say, is like, what's the world building trap, right? So I've just been saying, like, oh my gosh, fun, engagement over sort of logic. But at the same time, you have to be able to have the logic that you need. Fury Road and Furiosa don't need much because they can set what their story is and dance around with anything or just avoid any topics they don't want to cover, right? They just, we're not going to talk about it. We're not going to talk about how Gastown gets its gas because it's not important. It doesn't matter. Maybe there is an underground pipeline and there are oil fields somewhere else that are still pumping, and because they're automated, just pumping, the nuclear blast didn't destroy them, and so they're just still kind of going on autopilot, and stuff's going into the pipeline, and the pipeline's still running to this refinery. Now, granted, why anyone would build a refinery in the middle of a wasteland or a desert doesn't make any sense. In somewhere like Texas, where there are oil fields, the refineries around the coast, because you go on and refine it, and then get it going like in ships or to other pipelines, right? doesn't really make sense. But you can kind of hand wave things away. If you're playing a game and your party has essentially 360-degree access to these areas, you can hand wave stuff away until they come up and play, in which case you have to engage with them. And I think one of the dangers that you have to avoid is when you refuse to engage with the logic your party needs. Because I've seen that happen where the GM has an interesting idea, hasn't fleshed it out or hasn't done whatever, and then they don't want to engage with it the way the players do. Like, so you have a GM who creates a gas town, and the party smartly decides, well, if we want to get leverage on gas town, we don't control the Citadel, and we can't get to the food. Bullet Town would be nice because we could have lots of bullets, but ultimately that won't get us into gas town either. We need to threaten the supply of the oil, and then we can get leverage on gas town, and that makes sense. But then the GM doesn't like that for whatever reason. Maybe that's not part of their plan, and so what they do is they just kind of nope it. Nope. And that's where you can get kind of the frustrating flip side of this kind of thing, where things don't make sense in a way that's visible. The seams are starting to show, and you're not filling in those seams, and then it's not fun anymore. It's not engaging. You're actually turning off. You're actually anti-engaging. Let's see. Could be a kid or something else. Also, Could be Kid also says this is the most different Mad Max because it took place over like 15 years rather than a few days or weeks. This is more like the Odyssey. Yeah, there was definitely it was interesting the different style he did with the chapter. So he's got some chapter title cards, and yeah, it takes place over a long period of time. This is one. It kind of has that. What did he say? It was like the Odyssey. The thing that I thought of almost right away was Conan. The way Conan the Barbarian, the Arnold Schwarzenegger one, starts off with him as a kid, and they have the interlude that kind of sets him up. Then Thulsa Doom wreaks havoc on his life and sets him on this path, and then you kind of jump forward to him as you start with him as a kid, then you kind of get a little bit of him growing up, and then you kind of bump forward, and then him as an adult, and then he's running back, trying to run into or seeking out Thulsa Doom again, or does he seek him out, or does he kind of? I think he is kind of always looking for Thulsa Doom, or at least once he gets his freedom, he is. Oh, the Could Be Kid says they're running. I didn't know you could double speed videos. You're running double speed. That's all right. I'm always fine to catch up. In terms of so Could Be Kid mentions. Oh yeah, that's right. Planet of the Apes. They do put the. Yeah. So I mentioned before. If you missed it, I mentioned Planet of the Apes and the Statue of Liberty moment at the end, and yeah, they do put that on the cover, which is just stupid. I mean, why don't they just put Soylent Green as people on the cover of Soylent Green? I know. Sometimes things don't make any kind of sense. So the one thing to be aware of is you can have these things, you can prioritize fun over sense, which I said I think this reminds me you could do. But you have to be able to input the sense when it becomes necessary. You have to leave space for that sense. And I mean space in your lore, space in your brain to be able to fill in stuff. Because when you're watching these movies and you take aways, a lot of people do this, and I'm sure there are people doing it right now who are going to see Furiosa and they go, man, I want to play in that world, right? I'm gonna make a game, and I'm gonna have the Citadel, Bullet Town, and Gas Town. But then it can be that part of like, well, where are you filling in? The movie only gives you this very fixed lens on these places, and we don't get anything about how to, excuse me, how do they supply? How do they get metal? Do they, one thing it could be, do they pick up all the casings? Do they send some crews out to pick up bullet casings and other, other metal fragments to turn into more bullets? They actually did show a scene. It wasn't really useful. It was one of the things I felt like there were some weaknesses in the movie, and one of them which is they left some stuff just hanging out there that they just chose not to resolve. So they brought back, I know some of the actors, I know the original Immortan Joe, I think he passed. And so they brought a new actor, I think it's a new actor, who played Immortan Joe and looked, maybe you put them side by side together, you'd see some difference, but it didn't certainly look the same to me. They brought back the guy Nathan Jones as his big son, Rictus. And a little trivia, if you ever watched WWE at the time, WWF wrestling, I guess in the '90s, I used to watch it off and on. Nathan Jones was a wrestler for about half a minute, and it was kind of comical because I guess they gave him all these promos, these little vignettes of him, and then I guess he just didn't like it, so he like showed up for a hot minute and then bailed out. I know it's kind of funny seeing him in these movies. I'm like, oh, that's the dude who was a wrestler for a minute. He was in Troy, just for a. He was like somebody for Brad Pitt's to beat up on at the beginning, and then he was in Fury Road. I'm sure he's been else. I think he was in some of the Asian, like Ong Bak or something. He might have been in as some. Anyway, he would just show up in these movies off and on. So I was saying, the movie has got this fixed lens, right? So you don't have that, and I've seen folks kind of box themselves in. An example that's not Fury Road or Furiosa, but someone's world. I remember this is ages ago. I think it was on Reddit or something. Maybe it was a Discord. Somebody posted about their world, and they had these flying cities, and they had all this stuff detailed about these flying cities. The problem is that in their infinite wisdom, they had failed to account for how their party could get up to these flying cities. And they simply would not accept any of the methods that were proposed by people in the forum of getting them up there. And at the end, I think people just kind of just threw up their hands and were just said like, hey man, you got two choices here. Either you're going to have to break some of your lore or make some kind of exception, or flying cities are just going to cruise over your party's head, and they could wave to them as they go by, and they're never getting up there. Like, at some point, you're going to have to figure that out. And I think sometimes that's a danger, when we take these things from a movie, from a book or something else, that a different medium, because even in a book, even a movie, TV show, all these things, right? The author gets to put their lens on that focus, where you get to see as the viewer, and they get to turn that where they want you to go, and they can cover up, hide whatever they don't want you to go. So in the movie, you can have Gas Town in the middle of nowhere, or Bullet Town, and it can look like a quarry. Again, I don't know why. I don't know what the thinking is behind Bullet Town being a quarry, since I'm not even sure what is the thing in bullets that you have to dig out of the ground. I don't know. That I would have thought maybe. I don't know if it's gun. I don't know what modern gunpowder. I don't know how they make it. Maybe there's something that's quarried up, some material. Maybe I don't know what, phosphorus. I don't know. But anyway, they didn't even show any kind of manufacturing area. Like, where's the plant where, even if they were digging out all this stuff, where they have the assembly line of putting it into bullet form? They don't show. I don't know. It looked very much like just like a big quarry with some cranes and stuff. And they looked like they had a couple of like there was some kind of brick structure, but it didn't seem factory-esque at all in any case, right? But they don't have to deal with that. You as the GM do. But if you as the GM are too caught in that image of what they're showing in Furiosa, okay, bullets, all this stuff, then they can become it can become a trap almost, or it can become too confining. You're going to have to figure out, because your party, unless you're playing a super linear narrative campaign, your party doesn't have to keep that narrow focus that the movie had. They're going to be like, oh, wait a minute, let me go right. It's kind of like having a two-dimensional set. Oh, it looks like this town, and then you go around the back, and it's just, you just see the supports, and like, oh, this is not an actual building, it's just the front, right? In the movie, you just see down the street. When you're playing the game, the party will go down a side street and realize it's nothing there. And that is kind of, I guess, the danger part of going too heavy in the, like, this seems like fun without having, at least in your back of your mind, some space, or giving yourself some room to fill in some of the details, because you're only going to see the aspects of Bullet Town or Gas Town or whatever that they're going that they're going to show you in the movie, whereas on the game you got to kind of, it's 360 degrees. You got to flesh it all. You got to flesh it all out. I wanted to talk about the characters a bit, because I thought the characters were really good. Furiosa is a little bit of I don't want to say a cipher, but she's kind of flat. She's kind of in the same way that Max can be kind of flat in a way. I think it works okay, because the other characters are more interesting and allowed to be quirky. So maybe it kind of works. And Furiosa, not quirky at all. Even, especially, given everything. other people very heightened quirk. And I guess if I think back to the other Mad Max movies, it's kind of similar, right? Max himself never comes across, whether it's in Fury Road or in the earlier Mad Max movies, we don't ever really learn too much about Max, especially if we kind of put the the original, Mad Max movie where he's a futurist, where he's a cop kind of on the road. I mean, there's just not a lot to Max, right? He's kind of he's the man with no name in apocalyptic terms. He just kind of, he walks in and everyone kind of, he's like the mirror for everyone else, or everything else kind of bounces off and shows some reflection off of him. But then all the other characters are kind of super quirky, whether it's Master Blaster, whether it's who was the original guy? What was the guy from the original Road Warrior movie? His name, Lord Humongous. Those guys. A lot of attitude, a lot of quirk, have a lot of fun. And I think they did the same formula here, which works. And I guess I bring it up not only because I just enjoyed it in Furiosa, okay, but I think it's one of those things that plays really well in games. I like quirky characters, NPCs. I think you can end up taking it too far, but I think what ends up happening very often is you have these characters who are kind of blank slates. And I've mentioned this before if you've watched other videos of mine. The shopkeepers that are always just surly, the tavern, you go to the bar. I mean, how many people have been playing in their games, and every time they go to the tavern, the barkeeper is just kind of just this surly. Toe Cutter hey Michael, Toe Cutter's from Mad Max. That's the guy from and I think he's the same. Was he the same actor as Immortan Joe originally? I'd have to look it up. Now I was thinking of Lord Humongous, the guy who's wearing the hockey mask, and the right. Let me hold on. I got my screen behind me, my computer. I'm pretty sure Toe Cutter is Mad Max. Let's see, Mad Max 1979. And that is, if I go to stars, yep, Hugh Keys Bernie as Toe Cutter. And he did pass. I think he was also Immortan Joe originally. Yeah, he was. Yeah, he died a couple of years ago, unfortunately. So they got somebody new to play Immortan Joe. Hold on, let me see what's going on. Kabuki Kid says, gunpowder, sulfur, charcoal, and saltpeter. Ask Captain Kirk if he can somehow whip it up with the raw materials in the wild. Bullet Town was like a strip mine. I guess you are to believe that they have all or most of the materials there. And yes, Michael, I am talking about the Ayatollah of rock and roll. Absolutely. Yeah, Toe Cutter was, was Immortan Joe. Yeah, yep. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we have to. There's a lot of that there's a lot of that suspension of disbelief. Though, the thing is, somebody mentioned that on. I posted that same short to TikTok, and somebody was on TikTok. I was like, it's called suspension of disbelief, and I know what it's called, but I'm trying to think of it from the authorial point of view, not the audience point of view. Of course, me as an audience member, yes, that's exactly what I'm doing when I embrace all the absurdities and decide, or just with the flow of the movie, you get into it, so you're not thinking about it. Yes, that is absolutely suspension of disbelief. But I'm really talking about embracing it from the other side, or how as in looking as the author and remembering that we can that's a tool. That suspension of disbelief, or attempting to get our players or our audience, in this case, and our audience in terms of kind of world building. I don't mean to say that because I do not like the idea of the game master, the referee, as sort of this performer for the players. But in terms of this kind of the world building, is you are more or less mostly building the world, and of course exceptions if you're doing something that's much more group world building. But you are doing kind of the world building, which I really enjoy, and I think when we look for realism, I think, and look for things that make sense, I think one of the things we are doing is we're trying to meet that threshold of the suspension of disbelief. But I think sometimes we can take it too far. It ends up just being kind of a drag. Unless you're, it obviously the kind of game you're running is going to dictate a lot of it. I think sometimes the other way can be a drag too, because it's hard for me to suspend disbelief if things seem too random and just crazy. If it's just crazy town all the time, then that to me doesn't hit that threshold, and I find that I don't embrace it. I need something a little bit, my appreciation is mostly for things that are just a little bit more grounded. On the other hand, if you just try to ground everything to heck, you're not going to get the suspension of disbelief either the other way. And then when you want to throw in a fantastic element, it's hard to do because it's so mundane and grounded. But in terms of the characters, or not but, in terms of the characters, to go back to what I was saying, having them have some fun, right? Have some fun with them. I really liked Dementus as a character. He's just fun. Like, he's not smart, but he's not super smart, and he's not super grim. He's got this, and I think it might have thrown some people off. Somebody I talked to, a friend of mine, was talking about they were kind of waiting for me to kind of crap on the Hemsworth performance. But I didn't, because I just got into it. I mean, they gave him a bit of like a fake nose job kind of thing. They put sort of some prosthetics on his nose, I think just to make him a little bit less handsome, just to kind of tone that down a bit, and also just kind of it made his face seem a little bit goofy. And I think that just like, maybe it helped him. I think as an audience, it probably helped us to maybe separate him from his other characters like Thor Thor's got his own goofiness, but very kind of different, and let him kind of do it. And I think he really I felt like he really ran with the performance, and it worked really well. But he had this kind of goofy energy to him. Like, he's someone who is formidable. He's someone who was dangerous, but he wasn't this just kind of dark, brooding danger. It was especially nice because that's kind of what Immortan Joe was, more or less. This sort of, kind of the, I don't know, sweet tooth clown, kind of evil clown, kind of mask thing over the nose and the shock white hair, and just brooding all the time, and either making profound statements in a deep voice or just, walking with, he's like this, he fits more kind of that almost like I don't want to say a Thanos type thing, but you're sort of stereotypical villain, just beefy and brooding, and that's fine. But then you have these other things around here, and I think a nice foil for that, on the one hand, was the Chris Hemsworth sort of goofy Dementus, who is nevertheless dangerous, inventive, powerful, but a bit of a goof. And then also they surround Immortan Joe with his kind of goofy cadre of like kids and relatives. I don't know if George Miller is a bit of like a kinky dude, but there's, and I don't know, just his character's quirk, but I don't know who the name of the guy is. Let me see if I can look it up real quick, because there's the guy who has like the nose, he's got the metal nose piece, and he's like, they make him kind of really sort of fat in a weird way. And let me see if I can, does anyone remember who that guy is? People Eater, is that the guy's name? And he's constantly, there's something with nipples, because there's at one point towards the end, Chris Hemsworth's got his shirt off, maybe it's not even towards the end, and I don't remember what they did to him, but his nipples were bleeding, and there's like a little bit of blood running down from his nipples, and obviously his shirt's off. And I was thinking, like, what is going on? Like, I don't know. I couldn't pinpoint in the moment what exactly happened to the guy. What happened to do that, and why is that doing that? And then there's the People Eater, who has his suit, but he's also got little chains from nipples, and he's constantly playing with one of his nipples. It's just a weird little quirk, and I don't know if, like, was this actor's particular, this is just something that they like, their particular, everyone likes to have, I think as actors like to have a quirk. I know that cigarettes are always great, because people could have all these different ways of playing with the cigarettes, and maybe this is something he could play with. Was it that it was ripped out the chains? Maybe that was what it was. I guess I must have just turned away or missed the ripping of the chains. I just kept seeing his bleeding nipples, and I was like, what is his nipples bleeding? But there's kind of a lot going on in that moment, which I won't kind of spoil. But I was kind of like, what is going on with him? But yeah, then the People Eater constantly touching his nipple as he's doing stuff. So, I wouldn't say it's off-putting, but I did find the People Eater thing, it was kind of funny to me, but it was a little bit distracting, but I just was taking it like, that guy, I mean, I guess in this world, almost to survive, if you can get kind of turned on by this stuff, you're surrounded by it all the time, so hey, I guess go for it. Kubi Kid says that just to make him freakier than he is, all public with his kinks. Yeah, I mean, maybe. I don't know. And I'm not saying you should do that in your game. Like, obviously, keep in mind your audience, keep in mind who's playing at your table. before you start deploying all kinds of kink in your game. But I like the fact that like Rictus is kind of like the two sons, Rictus and it's like not what was the other guy's name? It was like Scrotus. The names are goofy, but it kind of makes sense. They're all sort of flawed, and maybe that it's. I think you have the in fiction reason, right? All these characters are a bit goofy, and they're flawed, and that flaw isn't just in their characters; it's also in their very genetics. That's something that it comes up more in Fury Road, right? This idea of you're trying to get these people who are essentially kind of non-genetically pure, genetically sound, right? No weird, no weird mutations. You're trying to get kind of genetically sound humans, and you're trying to make more of them. And that was one of the threads that. Oh, wait a minute, Kabuki Kid, you're like the Mad Max historian here. Scrotus was in the Mad Max video game. Okay, I never played that. Miller had a hand in getting that going, but then never worked with them to finish it. I think he wasn't pleased. Well, it happens. Yeah, because there was the other guy they had in the Fury Road movie, but he was like really small and he was in like a weird chair thing. So you have this interesting reason, right? So there's almost this in fiction reason why they're quirky, because they're not genetically sound. They've got these weird little mutations, and even though Rictus and Scrotus and those guys aren't as outwardly mutated as some of the other ones, they clearly have these kind of mutations going somewhere. Like Rictus needs his mask, his airs. I mean, so does Immortan Joe himself, has that breathing apparatus. And then the other ones maybe are a little bit off. And then Furiosa, maybe that's why she's more flat, is kind of... I mean, and Dementus also seems fairly straight or non-mutated, I guess, or just more or less whole, genetically speaking. I don't even know what the right word to use is. Chumbucket's the character who gave Furiosa the car. He was in the video game, too. Okay. That stuff makes sense. But I like that idea. But, that's the other thing. In the movie, I give the movie a little bit of leeway on this. But they kind of drop some of these things. So Furiosa, one of the things that she, that Conan kind of thing, she's a kid, she's capped, she's coming up. It was kind of neat. And one of the things was, because she's from this idyllic place, which I think is the place that Furiosa tried to get to in Fury Road, right? Remember Furiosa drives the truck over and they try to get somewhere, and then she meets the other ladies, and they're like, where's the thing? And the ladies are like, I haven't been a while since I watched Fury Road, but basically it's gone or whatnot. And I think that spurs the plan to kind of turn around and go back, try to take the Citadel. So she comes in this place. So she comes from kind of this genetically sound stock, and that's played up at the beginning. And Rictus, when she's a kid, is actually kind of grossly sort of wants her in a way. But that's kind of a big deal. She gets traded from Dementus, who captures her from her mom. Dementus has her, and is kind of forced to trade her to Immortan Joe, who wants her for his breeding pool. Remember the ladies who Furiosa in Fury Road saves the ladies? Well, she originally was kind of in there with the ladies. It's pretty simple. But that thread is dropped really quickly, with no real payoff. She escapes. There's one moment where Rictus is like, do I recognize, because she could have escaped and run away, but she doesn't. She kind of hides in plain sight. She doesn't leave the Citadel. She sticks around in the Citadel, but she pretends to be a boy. Okay, that's something, right? That's a trope, right? The girl who's kind of obviously a girl if you look at her twice, but whatever, everyone kind of believes she's a boy, and she pretends to be mute so that nobody will have to hear her speak. And at one point, Rictus, she had earned some gloves. She did something heroic or notable, and Scrotus gives her this guy's gloves because he wouldn't go and do the thing, so she did it. So he gives him gloves. Those gloves, she's got a tattoo of the way home in kind of a star tattoo that she made. So that's the gloves cover that up. And at one point, Rictus kind of grabs her and then is like, "Do I know you? Do I recognize you?" And before he can kind of see, she's got the gloves on, so her tattoo that I think he would recognize, I think is the idea. He doesn't really see it, and then something happens and they move along. But after that, they don't touch that again. It doesn't come up. And she, even at one point, she's got her name. They know her name's Furiosa, she ends up getting in with a crew, but then she just, at some point, she's just outwardly showing as a woman, and nobody cares, including Rictus. Nobody, and Morton Joe, they don't care. And you see so few women in, there's Dementus's crew has one woman in there, and she's obviously not genetically sound, or either that or she's had something happen to her. But there's really no other women. So the idea that suddenly this woman could just kind of reveal themselves in their midst, and they're like, okay, Furiosa, yeah, you're now whatever. It doesn't make any sense. And the movie does a good job of moving fast enough by it that you don't really think about it too hard. Is why does Rictus not care about her now when suddenly her hair is out and she's just going now she's doing stuff like nobody cares. Of course, later her arm gets, she has to get her Furiosa arm, so that happens. And I don't know, and I was thinking whether that would kind of, it doesn't really matter in terms of their genetic soundness, but maybe just the fact that she has this injury might have turned, someone up. But they don't ever, it's never spoken of again. She's just Furiosa, and she's kind of going around. The other thing they really don't touch at all, it's like, and I said this before, I kind of like they did the 3 poles, where you got these 3, where we in our games, this idea of factions is something that we play up a lot, right? Multiple factions and multiple goals. These factions, they add dynamism and how they interplay with each other. And built into this wasteland system is at least the potential for 3 factions at minimum. And there can be multiple ones, right? Dementus actually begins as a 4th faction. If you and the way you don't see them before Dementus gets involved, but if you were to take Fury Road and understand or know that political mapping maps onto Furiosa, you would see that, okay, there's, Gastown, Bullet Town, and the Citadel, and those 3 things are kind of your 3 power centers, and then you might have, and then Dementus is kind of a 4th roving, and there are probably other ones. In Fury Road, they had other ones holding certain geographically important locations, so on and so forth. Kabuki Kid, going back to Furiosa, says that she proved herself as a fighter or warrior while on the war rig. I get it, but Kabuki Kid, I'm sure, I can read into what happened, but they don't ever tell us. And it's weird because I would imagine, my guess would be from Immortan Joe's perspective, having a genetically sound breeding person is way more valuable than a good second war rig person. And she was never commanding her own war rig. She was second in command to the guy doing the war rig, who had he had a stellar record before she ever showed up, right? Yes, he needed a new crew, and they kind of, okay, but I imagine the importance of having those his breeding harem for him is way more important. I just can't imagine that suddenly that would just be forgotten. Unless there was some reason, and again, all it takes is having some kind of scene to paint that for us, for Rictus to go berserk, and then Immortan Joe to say no, or the war rig guy to say I need her, and things. There's just something to make the connective tissue, because the other thing is just don't have the Rictus bit of it. You don't need it doesn't amount to anything, so why not just have her escape and do the whole thing as it was, and not have Rictus be involved? Just those 2 things together, any one of them, maybe you can kind of hand wave away a bit, but they just have both of them, and they just don't address it. And the other thing that they don't address at all is we don't get a sense of... Immortan Joe plays an interesting role. So we have these 3, right? We have the 3 polises. Bullet Town, Gastown, the Citadel, these 3 factions. But they're all kind of united under Immortan Joe, which I think makes sense. If we're going to have a high king, so to speak, of the wasteland, controlling the food, I think, makes you the high king, because everything else you can kind of do without. But you can't do without the food and water, and I presume that it seems like they've got a water. I know they have a water source. Fury Road, they were able to turn it on. It comes out through the pipe right there. They got some kind of spring in there. I don't know how it works on top of the mesa, but they've got some kind of spring, access to the spring somewhere in the depths of that thing. So they kind of got that stuff covered. But Immortan Joe's at the top, and the other 3, and then Dementus starts off on the outside, ends up taking over, Gastown. So you got the factions, but it's like you have Furiosa, and then I guess Furiosa in a sense would be her own faction, right? If we're using Furiosa to be kind of stand-in for the player characters, let's say she's her own faction, and then you've got the NPC factions, Dementis, and then call it a Morton Joe's family kind of thing. It's never really clear what Furiosa's relationship with the Morton Joe faction is. So we know that she was traded over there, but she was a little kid, and I can't imagine that she felt somehow that like, oh, Morton Joe, you're my hero. No, like it's never set up that she would feel. And Morton Joe is never portrayed as anything but kind of maybe a really smart, but obviously brutal, effective but brutal leader. He's not somebody that's doing that, and they just don't ever really explain like why she's. Why she even stays there. Like you'd think at any particular moment she probably could have gotten a single bike and probably gotten out of Dodge. I mean, she has some big. Her grand plan of hiding a motorcycle, underneath the war rig with some food and rations, and then taking off. Like it's one of those plans that like why? Why do you need to go out with the war rig? Why couldn't you just slip out? The way home, you could probably just find, and they're such good shots. Like Furiosa with a gun in her hand, like a rifle or definitely a rifle. They are crack shots. It seems like someone with those set of skills could probably get out on the wasteland and then find some poor dude riding a bike and grab a bike and go. I don't know. But it felt like it was a missed opportunity to really kind of flesh out what's going on. Like, why are we, and I'm going to want to bring this back to gaming a little bit, but I'm sure you've experienced this as a player. I know I have that sense of like, why are we working with we have a benefactor. Why are we working with him? And I felt that same way with Furiosa. Why is she working with them? Again, why is she hanging around? Why didn't she take the chance she could and get the heck out of there? Like what is she staying? And why is it Morton Joe? At one point, they have this exchange, which is very just kind of Hollywood movies, and when you get him, he's mine. And it's like why does a Morton Joe care what you think, like about Dementis? Like what? Like okay, I'm like imagining Morton Joe. I don't even think they have him say anything. It's kind of they have like maybe they close up of his face, and then he leaves. But I'm thinking to myself like, why? Who is she? Why is she doing this? What kind of pull does she like? She has no, that's something that the main bad guy says, and yes, sometimes the hero will say it too. You're like, he's mine, I want him, whatever. But it's kind of something that the bad guy says when they have the pull to be like, you're not going to kill him. You guys out there fighting this thing, you're not going to kill him. You're going to save him for me. But it just, it's like, oh, okay, Furiosa, sure thing. I did feel like the third act got kind of went a little bit too, they kind of got talky, and they had to have those conversations that they love to have. I think it's funny too, because I think a lot of GMs like to have those kind of monologues, or they want to have those reveals, those we're the two sides of the same coin, you and I, or whatever. Like you're just like me, and they do the same thing here, and it's part of me is thinking like, man, why are we doing that? And they tried to. I would say they tried to, because they wanted to give, one of the things that's interesting about this. Here's something that's interesting about this setting. It doesn't totally make sense, but it's interesting. Is the setting, this post-apocalyptic universe, is not so far removed from the post-apocalypse that the people, at least the generation, to say the middle-aged generation, is still from the either pre-apocalypse or right at the, or no, they must be from the pre-apocalypse, because the say Dementis had family that they lost in the apocalypse, and we don't know anything about how long. When we say the apocalypse, was it a day? How long did it take? Did it take a year for things to just become what they are, more or less, or become the genesis to get to where? Like we don't have any idea of how long that was, but we know that the society as it is pretty much set and has been set. But we're not generations and generations and generations removed from that, because there are people who are around and they're not old and decrepit who still either have memories of the actual events of the apocalypse or were born kind of pre-apocalypse, including folks who are like I said, the Dementis can't be too old. Certainly not at the beginning of the story when Furiosa is a kid, and then even fast forwarding 10 or 15 years, he's still, maybe say he's middle aged, right? So he's not he's not like a 90 or 100-year-old decrepit person. Kabuki Kid says that George Miller doesn't seem to care a lot about continuity. This is the first time there was any solid continuity between movies, because they focused on the same character again. Oh yeah, totally. I get it. But what it does is, like, one, it puts the timeline in a weird spot, because how do you get all these how do you make the Citadel the Citadel? It again doesn't make any sense. And who would have done this before the apocalypse? And it would have taken forever to get those giant cranes, because those giant construction cranes that are on the top of this mesa. Like, that would just be an insanely expensive task in just time, manpower, everything. Kabuki wants to know what happened to Bartertown. I don't even see, but I don't mind that part, Kabuki Kid, because we don't really know where Bartertown is in terms of the wasteland. So that part I don't mind. Like, okay, we're not going back to Bartertown. That's fine. I'm glad they don't bring that stuff in, because it's that kind of, like, I like that they seem to avoid some of the fan servicey things. Not all of them, but they avoided some of those things. Hey, we're just like some of the Star Wars movies and Star Wars things that have been bad about doing. It's just kind of fan service everywhere you look, just trying to overwhelm you with look at all these callbacks and things and different things. They didn't do that. So I'm glad they didn't have someone say, like, what about Bartertown? Or you're like, we can't get bullets, let's go to Bartertown. Like, I'm glad they didn't do any of that. So number one, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. And number two, I'm fine that the world is bigger than this. I'm fine that this story isn't about the whole world, right? And we know and they even show kind of the beginning, right? We zoom into Australia, and then we zoom into a particular part of Australia, and that's where the story takes place. And I'm fine with that. And I find that Bartertown could be somewhere completely different. I don't even know if they ever established if Bartertown was also in Australia. Was it somewhere else? I don't know, but it could easily be anywhere else. That is a-okay with me. But in terms of kind of the story and sort of building things out, you end up with these situations where the character relationships don't make a ton of sense, and I felt like they kind of struggled with that a bit, with kind of we don't really know. We're not really told why Furiosa's with Immortan Joe to the extent that she is, and she doesn't try to get out. We don't really know. We're given these kind of little backstory hints, which I like. I like the fact that, look, in terms of lore, right? As a GM, right? We love our lore. Oh, more lore. Got to have more lore. Let's write up a bunch of lore. And they avoided, there's a little bit at the beginning, but they avoided a whole bunch of just backstory stuff. Obviously, we're getting Furiosa's backstory. That's kind of half the movie. That's fine. Or the whole movie, in a sense, is her backstory in terms of from Fury Road. Like, this whole story, this whole movie is her backstory. Fine. We don't know about Immortan Joe's backstory, and we don't need to know about Immortan Joe's backstory. That's also fine. And it's probably one of those things, because of, like I said, the fixing the lens, and as Kabuki Kids mentioned, kind of George Miller and his style. You probably dig into Immortan Joe and that whole Citadel setup, or all through and you're probably going to end up opening more cans of worms than you're closing. So it's probably better you just take it as read. They're there. Who knows why they're there? Maybe they'll have some kind of Citadel, Citadel, a Mad Max saga movie. Maybe they will. I don't know, but we're not going to worry about that. But they kind of introduce it with Dementis, because I think they want to have this kind of thing at the end, which is that kind of like, we're two sides of the same coin. So by having him kind of have this family, or having had a family that he lost in the apocalypse, when Furiosa, because he's responsible for her being separated from her family and her family being destroyed, Dementis is responsible. When she's able to finally, I guess, spoilers for the end of the movie, but when she's able to finally get her vengeance on Dementis, they can have this whole thing of like, you lost your family, I lost my family, like, aren't we the same kind of thing. But it's just kind of lame, because it's the thing that everybody does. you were the same, you and I. I mean, the Batman Joker thing probably did the best, where they're not really the same, but they're that sort of like the mirror images of each other. I thought that was maybe one of the more well done versions. It's just something that comes up, I feel like, all the time. And I would say, as a GM, please don't do that with your bad guy trying to take like your party and go, we're just like you. It's kind of like I used to see this a lot. Not used. Well, I haven't seen it in a while, but people I think go through a phase where they want to have their parties fight their opposites or fight their mirror images. Like, look, I'm going to have another party that's just like our party, and we're going to fight. And everyone seems to love it. And I just think, or I see all the GMs seem to always love it. And I think, like, God, what a awful. Maybe it's just me, but I'm like, that is just terrible. Like, I don't want to, like, I'm fighting myself. It's that same kind of, it's just so overwrought. And, like, please, I don't want to fight myself. It's not particularly fun. It just feels like a weird, I don't know. But it appeals to everybody. In the same way, I feel like this thing where your supervillain and your hero have to be like, we're the same. And of course, that means that the hero does something different, right? No, we're not the same. Though I don't know. I mean, what Furiosa ends up doing, it's as bad to a single person as anything that Dementis did. So maybe they are secretly the same. I'm not sure. Let's see. It says, other than the first movie, this is sort of the first time they solidly confirmed they're in Australia. Obviously, you always assume it is Australia because the accents and whatnot. Yeah. I mean, right. I would have assumed it. They all took place in Australia, but yeah, you're right. They don't say. We could also mention there's a comic book series, about 4 issues, that covers some of the history on some of these characters, but I haven't read them. Oh yeah. I'm of the point of view that you shouldn't have to read all the extended fiction to get what's going on. I hate that when that's used as an excuse for Star Wars stuff or DC stuff or Marvel stuff. Like, no, man, you don't get it. This would totally make sense to you if you read the limited series and you read the graphic novel and you read it. It's like, I don't care. I'm watching the movie. They got to make it work in the movie. If they can't make it work in the movie, you can't blame it on me for not having read all the ancillary material. Like, this is what I'm watching, this medium. So show it to me in this medium. If you're going to tell me that I got to go read 8 other things, and you're out. Michael Frager asks, what does she do? Okay, well, spoiler alert. So kind of a big spoiler alert. So tune out if you don't want to hear what happened. But and I assume, Michael, you're okay to be spoiled because you're asking me this question. So through the whole movie, Furiosa is carrying around this peach seed. I don't know how long seeds last. There is a bit of a choose your own adventure. Yeah, it kind of gives a little bit of the clue, where it's like, here are 3 different endings. It's not, of course, they don't do it's not funny like Clue, but yeah, they give kind of 3 different endings, and then they go like, but here's at least what we're saying is the real ending. So she's been carrying around this peach seed, and she alternates between hiding it in her hair and hiding it in her mouth, and it's never explained what this is supposed to do. I don't know if it's keeping it moist for I don't know how many decades in your mouth and then in your hair. I don't get it, but they have multiple times they show her like pulling it out of her hair. Maybe she shows it to somebody, then she puts it in her. I don't understand what the putting in the mouth thing. Anyway, she's got this seed, and apparently the seed is still viable after this time. Whatever she's been doing, it works because the seed still works. So she ends up doing is, I guess, because they don't show her whole procedure for this. She basically, I guess, she must chain him to the ground. I don't know. Could be consistent when she cuts her hair, keeps it in her mouth. I think there's a couple other times where she literally pulls it out and puts it in her mouth. I feel like there's at least one time where she's not cutting her hair and she still does it. But maybe that's it. I don't know. But I felt like they showed it more times than they showed her cutting her hair. But maybe that's it. Anyhow, so she plants. It's somewhere deep in the Citadel. She plants the seed in his belly, or his, really, I guess it feels like it's basically in his nethers, in his torso or lower torso. At least how it looks like in the film, like down there, plants it, and the tree basically goes into him and through him and is feeding off of him, and he's withering away, but he's not dead. And the tree, then it's like at the end the tree bears a fruit. Some years after it's planted, the tree bears fruit. So yeah, she basically uses him as a living soil for her peach tree. And just in terms of torturing torturing someone that is well beyond anything that Dementis does. I mean, Dementis tortures and does bad things to people. I mean, we see him do a couple things. But in terms of the amount of time that's happening, she's doing this for, it's got to be years. Gotta be years. But that's it. So spoiler passed. Done with that. It's it definitely feels like not exactly. I mean, maybe it's supposed to be the anti-hero thing to do. So yes, that was that. So yeah, Ian, you're safe. I'm done, and I guess I'm done. I feel like I guess I'm done with this. I just wanted to kind of talk about the movie. I wanted to kind of keep it sort of gamey. So hopefully, we're talking about kind of keep the kind of game perspective off and on. Because I love movies, I know it, but I know people don't tune in to hear just about movies, so I want to kind of keep it, try to turn it into what kind of gaming stuff, kind of gamey things. But that was it. That was Furiosa. I mean, like I said, especially the kind of this. I had some nitpicks, sure. There were some things that I didn't love, but overall, it was really good. I would call it B plus. Definitely worth seeing. It's unfortunate the kind of stuff that's just happened with movies and things nowadays that Memorial Day was rotten in terms of the movies, and I don't know if that's what that says for movies going forward or whatever they're going to do. This I think is definitely worth going to see. I have a nicer theater near me, so it's an experience that kind of holds up and it's enjoyable. I know it's very easy, and I do this too all the time. Wait till you get home. Wait till it's on streaming and watch it at home. But this is going to see. I appreciate you guys sticking around for it. I will stream something later today, but I just figured I would talk about this now while it was more or less fresh in my mind. Yeah, that's about it. Oops, what's going on? Oh, and Kabuki Kid says they wish Furiosa did better or will do better because he's playing them. The Mad Max want more movies. Yeah, I mean, hopefully we'll get more. Hopefully we'll get more because it's definitely his movies. These Mad Max movies are not. I want to say they really. Just the kind of things they do feel like big screen stuff, not small screen stuff. But it would be great if somebody took it. I would love if he did something anthology-wise. It'd be great if you were going to do kind of a TV series. Do it something with anthology, with different creators, putting their spins on different places. So somebody could come and do a Bartertown story for a season, and someone could come and find some other place in the wasteland or somewhere else that's been affected by this apocalypse, and kind of keep the Mad Maxy sort of vibe to it, but tell different stories and do different things. I think he could really do some neat stuff, but hopefully he'll make more movies. He's also pretty old. I want to say George Miller's like in his 80s or something, so I don't know. Let me just see really quick. I don't know how much he's got. So 45. So no, I guess he's in his late, he's 79. So who knows how long he's going to even be wanting to crank these out. Kabuki Kid mentions that the Mad Max video game might have been underrated. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not averse to checking out. Yeah, he's 79. So if they don't make one fairly soon, I'm not sure. I mean, look, credit to him, because a lot of folks, when they reach that age and they're making movies, it's I feel like he's been able to keep up his vision in a way that sometimes gets kind of, you just get older, things change, and it just things just kind of, I don't know, it's just different. But he's been able to kind of keep it up. North Sigma says Furiosa was so good. It totally was. I did really enjoy it. Like I said, I had some nitpicks, but I did really enjoy it. All right, folks, I will be back with a horizontal stream later on, but I wanted to, found unnaturally OD&D. Oh, man, Norik, I wish you'd been on here earlier because I'm getting ready to sign off, and I'd love to hear about your OD&D, unintentional OD&D stuff. Oh, Auto Duel? I used to I had Car Wars. I think I had the Auto Duel video game back in the day. So, and Norik, if you're on later when I stream normally, I'd love to hear about it, or hit me up on the forums or somewhere else on Discord or wherever, because I would love to hear about that stuff. Oh, his 972 men like it's a Carcosa hex map? Oh, yeah. That's true. That's true. I mean, you could really do a cool kind of hex crawl with the wasteland. It would be super dangerous, but I could totally see kind of taking something like outdoor survival and doing like the wasteland version. If I got too much stuff, I'm always trying to finish, but that would be a great kind of project. All right, folks, before I get hooked into more conversations, I'm going to let you go, but I'll be back later today if you're watching this on Friday. Otherwise, I'll just catch you in wherever you catch me. But have a great rest of your day, night, whenever you end up watching or listening to this. Game on. Game on. And I'll talk to you later. Bye now.